Hello and welcome to another episode of Warhammer Wednesday, which is where on Wednesdays I make a video where we talk about Warhammer and sometimes other miniature painting and miniature hobby stuff, but usually Warhammer, because I quite like Warhammer. This weekend I went to the London Grand Tournament, the LGT, which was pretty fun. In all honesty, I had huge amounts of fun. I hung out with Hellstorm Mikey quite a bit. We roomed together, got to meet some cool cats, I never use that term. Some cool people like Quips the Nerd from the Conclave podcast and so on. It was a lot of fun. What I'm going to talk about today is a little bit of my London GT experience, a little bit of anecdotal stuff, and also about how Warhammer tournaments in general are a bit of a mess. And this isn't to say that I didn't have fun, because I did. I loved it. Honestly, I played 8 rounds of Warhammer this weekend and only one of my opponents was a knob. And that's a pretty good success rate if you ask me. Even the games I lost personally were really fun for the most part. I did a lot of learning from them. They helped me to develop as a player and just understand the game better as well. So even my losses were great. So realize this isn't coming from a place of me saying I should have done better or whatever. I should have done better, but that's because I didn't play well enough. That's not what I'm saying. I want to talk about tournament structure and how I think it kind of detracts from what a good game Warhammer 40k can be. I will also just say now, before we get into it, that AdMech won, and AdMech is fucking stupid, and it probably needs a nerf. But I'm not going to sit here and moan about that either. That's kind of an obvious thing that we all fucking know. So like I said, I had an excellent time. I had an RTT on the Friday. I played 3 rounds with Sisters of Battle and I went 2-1, which is pretty good. I only lost to the person who won the RTT. And then I played the main event, which ended up being 5 rounds, which I'll come to more of in a moment. The main event was a grand tournament or a major where I went 2-3. I would have much rather to go 3-2, but I went 2-3. And also because of a very low scoring first round where I got shot to shit by orc buggies, I ended up only coming 308th out of just under 600 players, so I didn't even make the top 50%, which is unfortunate, but what can I say? Orc buggy spam is not an easy list for my army to buy into. So what am I saying about Warhammer tournaments being a mess or being kinda weird? Well, my background is Magic the Gathering, where Swiss pairings is what you go by. Your win rate is important, and then you get paired up or down and paired into top 8s and such via opponent match win percentage as your next tiebreaker. In the Warhams, Warhammer 40k, your win rate is important, so it is kind of Swiss, but by the very nature of 40k and each round being 3 hours long, these tournaments are 5 or 6 rounds at best. That means that the Swiss scoring and pairings, the how many wins have you got metric doesn't really work for determining top 4s and top 8s, because there's not enough rounds to really thin out the herd and get to your X and 1s. So what happens is the next pairing that matters, the next tiebreaker is victory points. Now, for those of you that are new to 40k and you haven't got quite into it as deep as I am, sorry, I'm holding up my Morven Val there. That's what I played over the weekend. Love me some. You gonna focus? I meant to hold this up earlier in the video. I'm just holding it up now. I love her. Fucking love her. Overperformed in every game she played in. Incredible. For those of you that are newer to Warhammer 40k, in a game of Warhammer, you are looking to score victory points based upon the mission. You can get up to 45 primary from holding objectives on the map, and up to 45 secondary from performing secondary actions and things that you pick at the beginning of the game. It gives you some flexibility on how you want to approach the game, and I think the scoring system and mission system is fantastic. I think it really elevates Warhammer beyond just shoot your stuff, you shoot my stuff, and whoever's better at shooting wins. It makes the game dynamic and interactive. There's also 10 points on the victory point side of things for having a fully painted army, but at an event like this, you'll have a fully painted army. That's just a thing you'll have. So you can score maximum 100 points. And ultimately, if you don't score 100 points in your first round of a Warhammer 40k event like this, you're probably fucked. And by that, what I mean is, if you are going to try and win the whole event, you need to score 100 or as close to 100 as possible. So usually in the game of 40k, if I score 76 and you score 50, I'm the winner. However, although you're the winner, and you're now in the X and O bracket, you've got 1 win, you don't have a very good battle point score for your first round, which basically takes you out of contention. Imagine being a Magic GP, if you're one of my Magic viewers, and you win your first round, and then you know immediately, because of how that game went, let's say you had less life at the end of it than the opponent, which obviously means that you can't play Death Shadow and all that sort of stuff in these situations, certain strategies come out of bounds, you can now not top 8. You just know it for a fact. Or the chances of you doing it are now in the 1% because you're requiring every other player who is good in this room to also fuck their score. So some of you are thinking, if you've got a score super high, that makes sense, right? Surely scoring 100 shows perfection. Yes and no. I think incentivizing people to score as highly as possible and rewarding people for scoring perfect hundreds is a good way to get people to perfect their craft, and I can definitely see that argument. However, certain armies and certain battle plans will not allow you to even get the full 100. The good example of this is a secondary called Retrieve Octarius Data. Basically, you have 4 different infantry over the course of a game do this action in a corner. That's sort of like retrieving data from a computer. They're hacking or some shit and sending it to the mothership above the planet thematically. And if they do it 4 times in 4 different table quarters, you get 12 points. You get 0 for 1, you get 4 for... Fuck, I can't do fingers. You get 0 for 1, you get 4 for 2, 8 for 3, and 12 for all of them. It's a very easy objective to get if your opponent isn't good at screening. So let's say their army has a small model count, they can't stop you getting in corners and stuff to do this. But the downside is that you can't score a perfect 15. Okay, so there's upsides and downsides, cool. But that shouldn't necessarily knock you out of the entire tournament in terms of winning, right? The problem with trying to score 100 and not giving a shit what your opponent is scoring, which is the case by the way, your opponent's score does not matter for your standing. If you go 5-0 and you score 100, 100, 100, 100, and all your opponents scored 99 points behind you, doesn't matter. You've won, you've got the highest score, you are the winner, congratulations. The problem with this system is that it doesn't incentivize you to really interact with your opponent at all. You are incentivized to take objectives that involve you not having to kill certain things on the enemy's board, not having to stop them doing their objectives, or interact with them in any meaningful way. If anything, you are incentivized to play in a way that encourages you to stay away from your opponent and interact as little as possible. And that's kind of whack. Some people do like it and prefer it. I was talking to quite a few people about this over the weekend as I sort of started to understand the tournament scene a bit better, and people were telling me that they liked it. It's kind of like a metagame puzzle on top of the normal metagame. So not only is it like, what can your army do against certain armies, but then you've got this other layer of like, how can I score the perfect 100, the highest score possible, whilst not affecting my opponent's score in any way, because who gives a fuck? And it's okay. It's okay if that's the game you want to come in and play, and if you are under that assumption. And honestly, this system won't change because of this video, and I'm still going to play in events, because I have no delusion of grandeur that I'm top 4 or top 8 anything, right? I'm just there to play games of 40k and have fun. But what I would say is that whilst it's okay to enjoy that metagame puzzle, it's not really 40k, is it? Like, the individual games of 40k where you interact with your opponent should be the focus, and how you perform in those games in an interactive basis should be the focus. It shouldn't be this solitaire exercise that it tries to be. And on top of that, we've got the turn 1 problem with shooting armies like Abmech. But again, I'm not going to go into that. So what's the alternative? Well, I'm coming to that. Don't be so hasty. I think there's a problem with 40k inherent for just how long the games take. You can't do what Magic does, where you go Swiss pairing plus opponent match win percentage and then do 13 rounds or whatever, like a GP might have. Say 13 rounds, excellent, 9 and 4, 12, 11, 12, 13. 13's quite on the high end. 11, 12, 13 rounds, you just can't do that. Now, the problem with the London GT, if I'm honest, the biggest problem I had, other than that, is very, very hot and the food on site was pretty fucking bad and there's no local food nearby. That's just a venue problem that I hope they fix next time. But it was only 5 rounds. This was a massive event. 600 players, only 5 rounds? I don't really understand why it couldn't have been 3 and 3. Well, I do. I say this. The reason it was 3 rounds on the Saturday and 2 rounds on the Sunday was that they went ahead and had it cut to top 4 for the semi-finals and finals on the end of the Sunday, because of time permitting. This is like a London-based event, 600 players, biggest in Europe since Corona. Why would you not go 3-day event and have some of it on the Friday? I heard some people saying that like people wouldn't have taken time off to come, but from my experience at Magic events, people do that. You just have to incentivize them to do it by, I don't know, having the main event on the start on the Friday, or make the event really, really good. So the way that I got my 8-round fix in was to play an RTT on the Friday as well. Anyway, I want to give an example of why this whole having to max score and not give a fuck about your opponents is weird. And I want to use my final round as an example of this, as a microcosm sort of just exemplar issue, right? This isn't like me moaning about my game. That game was super interesting and super fun. I just want to use this as an example of how it doesn't really make a lot of sense in the grand scheme of things. Here is Tabletop Simulator showing us off what the final the question was. There was a lot more things on the board. There was Death Guard over here. There was Death Guard here. I had some units back here and here. The point was, I had some Retributors, some heavy weapons multi-melters in a mid-board. And if you're wondering what this is I'm using to show this off, this is Tabletop Simulator. I'll put a link in the description below to Tabletop Simulator on Steam and to the 40k mod pack as well, which is available through the Discords and such. Anyway, they had a Playburst cooler here that had 3 wounds left on it, and as part of that to the last. The Death Guard player had taken objectives that allowed them to play very little into me and just go 100 points if I can't get up and on them. That meant that they could just have to stand on 3 objectives at the end of their turn and hold them for Stranglehold and the mission objective to get 15 and 15 on those secondaries. And the other one was keep 3 things that were worth 5 points each back to the last is the name of the secondary. Each one of those things, like a pop, would reduce their score by 5. That's important, reduce their score by 5. On turn 5 of a game of 40k, you score your primaries at the end of the turn. So, I had 2 Crusaders on this objective here, and he had 2 Death Shroud Terminators here. This is a 3 wound Plague Burst Crawler here. I am more likely, statistically, to advance up to here, pop all my shots into this and kill this, denying my opponent 5 points. I am, due to the inefficiency of shooting into 2 guys who've also got reducing damage incoming by 1 and 4 up invuns, a better invun than this tank here, a slightly lower toughness though at 5 versus 8, I'm less likely to shoot and kill these Death Shroud Terminators. That said, I haven't done the exact maths. This is my quick logic at the end, where we only like 15-20 minutes to go and we're in turn 5. If I advance here and shoot these dead, these Crusaders take this point at the end of turn 5, and I score 5 more primary. As far as I could tell, in the moment, I was more incentivized to try and pop the less likely thing I can kill to increase my score by 5 than go for the easier route, the more efficient route, the more likely route of reducing our opponent's score by 5. Because my opponent's score going down when they've got 100 and I've only got 80 doesn't fucking matter. So I attempted to shoot these 2 Death Shroud Terminators to death. I failed, meaning I didn't hold the objective, it was contested, and I only scored 10 on primary in the final turn. Can you see where I'm coming from with this? That it doesn't make sense that I'm incentivized to do the least interactive thing, or in this case, the least likely outcome, because reducing my opponent's score doesn't do anything. If anything, so this is the point, right? If anything, it just reduces their standing in the final tournament, which I guess you could argue is my job as a gatekeeper in the tournament for my opponent as an opponent, but I didn't want to do that. My opponent was a lovely bloke, we had real good fun, he had a good chat with me about like his chaos strategies and stuff, and he's really willing to discuss the game afterwards as well. It was a fantastic game of 40k that was really fun, before, during, and after. I'm not there to make his score worse, to lower his standing in the tournament, which won't affect mine. Further to this, imagine that situation where I've played my goddamn heart out, and I've scored 86 or 87 or whatever, and he's scored 100, and he's won, right? And then to the left of me, perhaps another opponent is getting their ass kicked, but their opponent decides to let them have some points. So it's turn 5, they're moving up onto objectives, and they're passing back to the opponent. On their turn 5, they decide not to roll up and kill the other creatures and stuff that are on the objectives, because there's no reason to. That player doesn't want to deny the other player any points. If anything, they can play in a way that's completely out of the normal and let them get onto points and maximise their score, just to be a good sportsman-like opponent. But what they're doing is making that player go up in the standings to beat me, and here we go. Do you see what I mean? It doesn't make any sense to allow this sort of thing where your opponent's score doesn't fucking matter. It's wild. So what is the alternative? You asked earlier and I told you to hold your horses. What is the alternative? Well, there's this thing called a 20-0 system, which is a thing that is used in Team 40k. It is something that Inners of the Scottish team, so shout out to Inners, mentioned to me on the Friday night. We didn't really get to talk again about it, so I've had to go and Google it and read about it a bit more myself to understand it. The point is that every single round you can score up to 20 points. The winner can score up to 20, and the loser can score up to 9. This point that you score is based upon the differential. So if you have a close game, as I've written in my notes here, let's say you score, let's say the differential is between 6 and 7 points between you. Let's say it's a 50-point loss to a 57-point win. Really small margin where you've actually battered each other and denied each other points and everything. Then that means the loser gets 9 points and the winner gets 11. You still get more points, you still got up in standings, but there's an incentive to interact and deny your opponent points. Alternatively, if you've absolutely destroyed your opponent and you've scored like more than 51 points ahead of them in the game, so your opponent's on 40 and you're like on 100 or whatever, you scored a full 20. You're incentivized not only to score as highly as possible, but to stop your opponent from scoring highly, and therefore the game becomes far more interactive. Like I mentioned earlier, I've taken Rod in all of my missions over the weekend, which is wrong. I should have taken Stranglehold in the final one. But Rod, Retrieve Victorious Data, is a mission objective where you can only score 12 points. The very nature of taking that denies you 3, and therefore you can't place as highly as you could if you took another one. It means that is out of the question. You want to play an aggressive army? I don't know, Termagaunt spam, an army that just coats a Termagaunt carpet, coats the map in little piddly miniatures, and you try and like keep your opponent off of primaries by having just too many bodies to cut through. Nah, because if you're not scoring the full 100, there's no reason to. But with the point differential, these disruptive plays, these alternative secondary win cons become available if you know you can deny them their 15 on their full one of their objectives. I just don't understand why we aren't moving to the 20-0 system. But I'm assuming I'm missing something. As the newbie on the block, as a new kid who's fresh into this hobby, is loving competitive 40k and the miniature building, the painting, all the stuff in it, apart from the balancing issues, I must be missing something, right? What the fuck am I missing? Why are we not on the 20-0 system as opposed to this thing where score 100, ignore your opponent is the norm? And that's why I throw it out to you, I guess. That's it. I've explained my situation. I've told you that I absolutely loved playing 40k this weekend in a large open hall. I was dripping with sweat all the time, but it was still incredibly fun. I just didn't understand the scoring system. It didn't really affect my games, apart from that final one where I was like, this is stupid. I should go for the 5-point differential. That's how I play. Right? I want to have the smallest gap possible, the highest gap possible if I'm winning. Apart from that, it didn't affect me. But I still found it really dumb when I started hearing people talking about it, like how they can do well at this event, and how people have dropped points in the early rounds and now they're out of contention. It just seems dumb to me. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. I hope you found that at least mildly informative about how Tournament 40k is played and scored, and how I believe it should be played and scored instead. Let me know in the comment section below if you think I'm being too harsh. Is there something I'm clearly missing? Is there something that you're missing because I didn't explain it clearly enough? I need to explain it again. Let me know in the comment section below. I've been Vince. I'll see you all soon with some more Magic content throughout the week and some more Warhammer content. Not next week, because I've got a week off, but the week after. Hopefully some lore videos. Might deep dive into that. See you all soon. Ta-ta for now.